Chuck E. Chan.
Here comes Chuck E. Chan.
Martial arts expert of Reptile Land.
Season 5 of Stranger Things, episode 1 through 4 just dropped. I watched them all, so I'm going to review them right now, tie them together with previous seasons, talk about expectations going into this 4 episodes and for the remainder of the season. So heavy spoilers. Watch the first 4 episodes if you're not caught up. That you've been warned. We're going to have to talk about season 2 of the show, where we get 8. We have that really terrible episode with Eleven's sister, 8. We found out in season 4 of the show, 1, Vecna, aka Henry, they were trying to duplicate 1's powers, and 8 has different powers. So in season 2, I thought it would be cool if every number ended up having different powers, right? Because 8 just has a different power than 11 and Vecna. But they kind of just have it where primarily it's Vecna's powers, and for some reason 8 took a different form. In season 5, it ends with 11 finding 8 again, which I think is really cool because when I first watched season 2, I thought, oh my god, they need to give Will powers because he spent a bunch of time in the Upside Down, which is somehow tied to these powers, right? Because 11, at that point in the show, was like, I created the monsters, I created the portal, therefore, the Upside Down is tied into these powers, inherently. The Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer's main target is 11, so there's clearly a connection between the Mind Flayer and 11, not only between those two, but also the Mind Flayer and Will. And I thought, alright, well, Will spent like a week or 2 weeks or whatever in the Upside Down. He got captured by the monster and infected by the monster. So he's going to end up with powers. I thought like they'd be crazy in season 5 to not give him powers. Spoiler alert, they do. And I thought this when I first watched season 2 because not only that, but also the fact that they stress heavily throughout the series that Will is like the wizard. He's the sorcerer. They refer to him by his position in the D&D game, and they show his like picture, his drawing of his character. So it just would make so much thematic reason, like purpose, logic, that he would end up with powers. I thought he would be like literally able to throw fireballs or something, which I think still will happen. I think that's why they brought back 8, is because 8 specifically having like different powers would be the perfect person to help train Will with his powers. Now, I do think that Vecna wants Will to gain these powers. I think that's his whole goal with his gathering the children. The fact that he probably could have killed Will at so many points throughout this series and hasn't. And then the fact that he leaves the Upside Down at the end there and again still could have killed Will. But no, he just says some minds belong in the Upside Down. So very important. Now, I chose this image of the kids looking into the basement of this house, which a brilliant image because it really represents the season very well, as there's a lot of underground tunnels. Now, also, I'm worried that they may have painted themselves into a corner and created plot holes, because if we remember in season 3, at the end of season 3, when they take out the other gate to the Upside Down in that like Russian base underneath the mall, Hopper survives the machine exploding miraculously, and it's explained that he like jumps down to some other platform. Now, prior to that explanation, I thought what would be really cool is if he jumped into the Upside Down, because there's a massive portal there, and he somehow in the Upside Down gets captured by the Russians, because that would make sense that would tie into the Russians' plan to make this gate, would be for them to travel through the Upside Down from Russia to the United States and then enter the United States that way. So I thought it would be cool if he's just in the Upside Down, gets captured by the Russians, they take him to Russia through the Upside Down, and then into real Russia. So in season 5, though, Dustin calculates that this wall that they encounter circles Hawkins, and the center point is Hawkins' lab, right? Where 11 would have created the portal to the Upside Down. There's a big problem here, as there is tunnels that they're navigating in the real world underneath Hawkins, right? That were created by the Mind Flayer in season 2. Not only that, but so would those tunnels exist in the Upside Down? Seemingly no. There's been no mention of them, but they might. But what about the giant hole that the Russians dug underneath the Starcourt Mall to this underground base that's deep, deep underground, where they literally opened a portal to the Upside Down, right? And the Demodogs were leaving that portal into the Upside Down. And not only that, there was a Demogorgon, I forget if it was one or multiple, that Hop and Joyce and Murray had to fight off in season 4. So there's a Russian Upside Down. Wouldn't there have to be? And how did the Russians enter the Upside Down, capture Demogorgons, and bring them out? Or if Vecna's controlling everything and has been the whole time, why did he send them out that portal? How did they get into the Russian Upside Down to exit into Russia? So they may have created plot holes, and this is kind of the problem, right? Just like in other works of fiction, when you have this character that is in control of everything, or he was actually pulling the strings the whole time, you create these potential plot holes where how does any of this add up, right? Because why would Vecna have his Demogorgons exit the Upside Down in Russia? Are they in Russian Upside Down? Why would he have them enter Russia? Maybe the Russians entered the Upside Down. I don't think we're going to get a really too much of a Russia explanation this season, but maybe we will. And what about this whole underground portal underneath Hawkins? They've got plenty of time to explain these things, or at least not create a plot hole, but I think there's potential plot holes riddled throughout, right? Just like they did the same thing with the Warcraft lore, like World of Warcraft, when they had it was all the jailers plan from the beginning. It's like, alright, well, if this other guy was pulling the strings the whole time, all these sort of other things don't really make sense. But that being said, we'll just move past that point because it probably won't get addressed. It probably won't end up mattering. But I think there has to be a Russian Upside Down. And why did Vecna deal with Russian Upside Down? Is the Russian portal that they would have made in Russia just go to the Hawkins Upside Down? Is that the only Upside Down? I have no idea. I don't think anybody does, but we'll just continue on. So one thing that I wasn't expecting with season 5 was the utilization of the character Holly, who is Mike and Nancy's younger sister. And as soon as it happened, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, because there is stuff that very well could and likely would have happened off screen. For example, in season 1, when Mrs. Wheeler visits Joyce and gives her a casserole, Holly goes with her, and Holly follows the lights down the hallway and into Will's room, and sees the Demogorgon or whatever. It just sort of cuts away, and then it cuts to Holly running and running to her mom. Theoretically, in that time, a connection was formed between Holly and Vecna, or it may have been formed prior to that. Holly several times is the only one who notices the lights flickering and follows them. So I thought that was really cool. And then Mike tells Holly about the cleric's abilities. And the cleric's one ability that I think they very clearly highlight, he talks about protection spells, and he talks about spells that would get her to safety and potentially others. So I think that Vecna, just like we learned that he pretty much, we're not exactly sure why yet, but I'm going to go over why I believe he targeted Will Byers. He also targeted Holly, because importantly, that's the next person that he specifically captures, right? Like, yeah, he kills Barb. That's mostly just to, like, feed the Demogorgon or feed himself. We're not exactly sure how it works, but he very importantly captures Holly. I think that's intentional, and I think just like Will, he wants Holly to gain powers, but unfortunately, she's going to gain powers outside, hopefully, outside of just like the 11 or Vecna type powers, which even Vecna's powers are far more complex than 11's. So it just makes all the sense that you're going to gather these characters with various powers, and they're going to have to, as a party, take out Vecna. I think that's clearly what they're going for. And I also thought in Season 2 that giving Max powers would be really cool. Sorry, that reminds me of The Simpsons, Max power. So I think Max already has powers at this point. When we, see her in Season 5 of Stranger Things, I think she's already obtained some sort of powers, or at least enough knowledge to where she'll be critically useful, and already is critically useful. Because, she's like, your party needs a Zoomer. In Season 2, she says this. So she's the Zoomer, right? And she is able to navigate the Upside Down basically better than anyone, theoretically better than Vecna himself. We're going to have to talk about that. I'll save that for later, as to why I think Max is safe in that specific cave, because I think it ties into a scene earlier on in the season, and sort of, I feel like they're going for this very clear plot point with Vecna and that cave and Will Byers and why he selected Will Byers, and it's very dark. Like, I think this second part of the season is going to get even darker. We've already been told that there's probably going to be a major character death. Well, we were told there will be a major character death. I think it's going to be Hopper. I'm not sure. That certainly adds a tension to the season that doesn't always exist in other seasons. There's like Barb, Alexi, Billy, Eddie. We lose plenty of these sort of one-off characters, but it's not often in the show that a major character actually dies. In the grand scheme of things, Bob Newby isn't that important, right? He's not really a main character. But I do think his advice is finally going to come into play, and maybe it already has, because like Bob tells Will in Season 2 that, what was it, Mr. Bilbo or something? He talks about this like scary monster that he keeps seeing in his dreams, but then he finally stands up to him, and then Will does that and then gets attacked by the Mind Flayer for standing up for himself, standing his ground. So it ends up being terrible advice in that specific instance. 11, in a major way, is going to have to confront Vecna, and Will, once again, if that's basically already happened. But I think in a final battle, going back and referencing that Bob Newby advice would be really cool, when Will, again, will have to stand his ground. A lot of stuff in this season, like, we'll go over the more minor things. The love triangle between Jonathan, Steve, and Nancy, like, we're going to have to get a conclusion to that. It's just kind of like unnecessary side plot so far. One thing that I kind of wish that they steered away with, if I would change anything, some of the melodramatic nature of things, because I feel like it's just illogical at certain points. Like when Dustin shows up and helps Steve and Jonathan in the van, the fact that they're so angry, the fact that Dustin and Steve are like screaming at each other, I feel like they play it up too much, this idea that these characters, they're frantic and they're screaming in moments where they don't really need to be. And like Dustin, it kind of fits his character overall in the season, right? Like his character so far this season is kind of losing it. But the fact that it happens in previous seasons, it's more so not fitting, where it's like, guy, so many times in this series, they have to just full on scream to silence the other characters who are just bickering at max volume. And that shouldn't happen multiple times in every single episode. It's kind of not the best writing, in my opinion. That's not like the biggest problem, and like I said, it's a little more fitting this time around, as the things happening are a lot crazier and larger in scale, as we have this military base that's in Hawkins and a portal and like multiple Demogorgons going around, and they know Vecna's around, and then there's this crazy like upside down military base. They're having to avoid the military and Vecna more meaningful way, because the military at any point could just take them out or capture them, and then so could Vecna. So like the stakes are higher. Now I think that clearly what they're going for with this plot with Will and Robin is that Vecna chose Will because he's gay, and he's the child of a single mother, and there's definitely like a level of insecurity, fear that comes around with that, especially being in like 1980s rural America and his dad. It makes a lot of sense, but I think that what they're going for, so when Vecna captures Holly, he takes her to his home in the Upside Down, but sort of like in Vecna's mind version of, or like portion of the Upside Down. We're still not sure exactly how that even works, but in Vecna's mind, he takes Holly to like his home, and specifically she goes into the various rooms and what seems to be Henry's childhood room, and she opens up this suitcase, whatever it was, briefcase it might have been, but she pulls out things for Scouts, the Boy Scouts of America. And instantly when that happened, I'm like, oh no. The Boy Scouts of America, if you don't know, outside of the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts of America is the like biggest network of PDFs, child abusers that abuse children in a certain severe way. And then the fact that Vecna, who is this crazy, murderous, monstrous lunatic, is wanting to reshape the world, and then he won't go into this cave, and he's able to capture people and sort of take over their minds, but his whole purpose is to reshape the world. He doesn't really, that's his main motivation. So the fact that they show all this scout stuff, and then there's this weird cave that he won't go into, that's one of his memories. Something really bad happened to him in that cave, and probably when he was in Boy Scouts. A Boy Scout group that we now know. In the 80s they didn't know this, but today we know that that organization was just legendary in a way. Infamous for boys being abused. So that's probably what happened to him in that cave, and whoever did that to him, these real life people who like actually abuse children in the real world. We're not talking about the show here, but we are. They're probably gonna, I would assume that they target boys that are like Will Byers, Boy Scout leader, whatever men are like attacking little boys in the Boy Scouts. They're probably targeting boys that are live in a single parent house. Their parents aren't together. They're vulnerable, insecure, maybe even gay. So that's probably what happened to Henry. Was when he was a boy, he, like Will, was gay and was targeted and abused by an adult, maybe multiple adults. Like, I think the remainder of the season, that's what the plot is going to be and what they're going to just flat out express. I don't think they're going to go insanely into it, because there's so much plot that still has to happen, and character payoffs for character stories that need to happen. But I think that's going to be what the whole wrap up of the story is. I think that Will sort of coming out It's going to be how he fully sort of embraces himself and his power and how they defeat Vecna. I think Will is the key component here. And I think Vecna targeted Will because saw that Will was vulnerable and part of him wants to save Will. He clearly wants Will to be his main disciple. And the fact that they have Vecna and he's trying to collect 12 kids, all right, there's some Jesus stuff going on here. You have Robin asks Will not to tell anybody that she's gay, and the fact that Vecna says some minds don't belong in this world, saying that directly to Will. At that point, he knows Will is going to gain powers, and that Will is not going to be accepted by the world that he lives in. In the real world, Will is going to have a very difficult life. He's already got all this trauma, but on top of that, he's gay in 1980s rural America. So his thought process is it doesn't want to live in that world, right? Will wants the world to be different, wants people to be accepting of people like himself, people like Robin. So Vecna's clearly going to try to pitch that to Will and say, hey, we can reshape the world to be more accepting. And I think that's genuinely what Vecna wants. Solid 4 episodes. Definitely did a lot of what I wanted them to do. I really like the joke. We're not conspicuous. And then they show the giant satellite on top of Steve's car.